disclosures by that point, and then we can make a call. We can make an offer on it. Great. All right. Well, hey, thanks for calling. Appreciate it. I'll get on it. All right. Bye-bye. All right. Hey, well, that was an interesting call. I'm out here doing my workout here, walking, and I got a call from a lady who saw me on this vlog, I think, and wanted to have me represent her on a buy. So thank you very much. So it's, I think it's 180 acres. I got to do a little research with additional 80 acres that can be purchased. It's in Douglas County, Wisconsin. I'm not going to give you the exact area yet, but I'm probably going to go up there today and take a look at it. You know, Douglas County is kind of characterized by a lot of aspen, a lot of cutover areas. A lot of times big tracts have been clear cut, and they could be bought at a pretty good price and then improved on, and maybe that's what we're going to find here. So I'm going to go check it out. We're going to do some pre-offer inspections, I guess, on today's episode of The American Landman. Okay, well, we're in the car and we are headed north to Douglas County. This is going to be, gosh, this will probably be a 2-hour drive for me to get to this place, but it's a pretty easy drive, and that goes along with one of the key factors that I talk about with finding a good quality piece of land, and that is geographic travel corridor. So this is up basically straight up Highway 35, and if you're on the other side of the river, on the Minnesota side of the river, you could come north on their version of Highway 35 and then jump over, I think, at Grantsburg, and then take off north to Dairyland. So although it's a 2-hour drive, it's a pretty easy drive, and that's always key. But let me back up a little bit and talk about how I got brought into this. So in this situation, I'm not the listing agent. I'm actually going to represent this buyer as a buyer agent. And one thing that I noted, and that is, I think, noteworthy on this as a lesson for you if you're looking at getting an agent involved, is to start early. This lady actually approached this agent, met with him, went on a tour with him, drove around, and really kind of started negotiating a little bit on this property. But when she kind of got into it with him, she felt uncomfortable that he maybe wasn't being as forthright about bits of information like disclosures and MFL plan, and she said she kind of felt like she was having to ask a lot of questions and he wasn't giving information, which could be the downside of having an agent that's doing dual representation. Now, typically, you know, most of the time it's really not a problem. And as a matter of fact, I've said this many times on this vlog that I actually think that working with a land specialist agent, whether they're the doing both sides or not, actually is an advantage, because they probably know the property really well and they're going to represent you very good. So if this agent ever watches this video, I want him to know that I'm not knocking him down for trying to be both sides, because I do it all the time myself, and it usually works out well. But in this case, for whatever reason, this lady wanted to have representation, so that's when she called me. So we've signed what's called a buyer agency agreement, and what that basically means in a nutshell is she's hired me to be her agent. I represent her as my client versus a customer. She's now a client. I have a higher fiduciary level of responsibility. I have a legal responsibility. And if you ask your agent in your area about a buyer agency agreement, that's honestly the best way to go about it. Now I represent her. I'm looking out for her interests. I'm going to try to do the best job I can. I always do, but I'm going to make doubly sure that I do a good job for her. So I also looked at the listing, and I pulled it up off the MLS, the multiple listing service, just to see how this agent had listed this property. And I found something that I hadn't seen before, and this is tip number one. Look at the payout. They had wrote on this MLS listing, the sub-agency was a 0 payout, no commission. Buyer agency was 2.0. Now, what does that mean? Well, sub-agency means that I'm representing this buyer and I'm really sub-agent to the other side. I actually kind of work for them even though I'm representing the buyer. If I hadn't seen that and I went about this, I was due no commission. Honestly, I'd never seen that before, so I'm really glad I looked at it. When I actually looked at it, I was kind of like, what's this? 0 and 2.0. I had to kind of think about it. And as I think back, when I was actually talking to the broker about kind of representing this lady after this other agent had kind of done most of the work as far as the early phase, it was kind of claiming what a term called procuring cause. Basically, that says that, hey, I procured this buyer. I'm the one that's bringing her to the table. And had I not asked him about working with her and his willingness to allow me into the deal, really he didn't have to pay me, I guess. But with a buyer agency agreement, I think that kind of blows that up a little bit. I think now legally he has to, because I represent her. And as a matter of fact, she said, if you don't represent me, I'm moving on. I'm not going to buy this property. So he kind of had some financial incentive, although a little begrudgingly, to let me in the deal. And he was a little salty about it. And I actually kind of understand that. I do understand his point. So I tried to give him a call. I called him. He didn't call me back, but I texted him. We kind of communicated. I think we're good. So let's talk a little bit about this property. Well, it's about 236 acres, and it's up in Douglas County, southern Douglas County, which is one of the northwesternmost counties of Wisconsin. This area is really wild, really desolate. It's kind of characterized by a lot of aspen forest. Anytime I think of Douglas County and anytime I see a property turning over, it always seems to be cut over really hard. And sure enough, about 80 acres of this property has been cut really hard. A logger, I don't know if he's a logger that owns it. I really don't know a lot of history about the owner, but he obviously took some money off the property by logging it, and it's coming back really thick. A lot of aspen regrowth with, high stem count, woody browse, and there's a nice road up the middle, I'm told, that's graveled, probably used for the logging. And then there's a series of food plots, it appears from the photographs, and it looks like they're actually getting some pretty good deer pictures and bear, and I'm sure there's grouse and woodcock in there as well. So it can be a really good property because of the improvements left behind from the logging. But because it was logged, a lot of times that detracts a lot from the value. And of course, I'll do a little research on this for her once I get a look at it, decide, what is the average cost per acre for properties that look like this after they've been cut and somewhat improved. So a little tip, you could buy cheap land that has been cut, and if they've improved on it with trails and food plots, it would actually be a pretty good way to get into a low-cost property, a large chunk of land for not a lot of money. So while this land up here is pretty inexpensive and you can buy large chunks for hunting, you got to consider a couple factors. Number one, is this likely to improve in equity? Is it going to go up in price? And I can tell you that Douglas County, the good and the bad is you can get into it really cheap, but it doesn't seem to go up in value like a lot of the properties that I'm selling in more southern counties or anywhere near, a metro area. The land up there a year ago or two or three, I would have said it's about $800 to $1,000 an acre. And even during this boom, it's still $800 to $1,000 an acre, maybe $1,200 tops, which is where they've got this listed, a little under $1,200 an acre. One of the reasons is the distance, obviously, but secondly, there's a lot of predators up here. A lot of bear, a lot of wolf. And if you're a deer hunter, you might not like that. It can hold down the deer population. It also tends to get a lot of snow, so you got environmental factors that can affect the quality of the animals that you're buying it to hunt. And you got to take that into consideration see how it fits into your desires. On the listing, they actually have some pretty good bucks. I would say high-end Pope and Young, so that's good, and I'm positive that we're going to find some good habitat here. A lot of woody browse, stems, high stem count, and that's what the bucks like, and that's probably why they're on this property. So that's been a positive effect of the logging. So I'm looking forward to seeing how the property is set up with food plot stands and that sort of improvement, and see what it looks like. So what we're going to do then, we're going to get up to this property. I'll probably arrive about 4:30 or so. We're going to drop the gator, and Lucy and I are going to go just drive around this property and map it. And then we're going to report back to this buyer. She's waiting with bated breath. She's actually asked me if I get a signal, if I can call her live or even FaceTime her. She's rather excited to get somebody on her side that kind of has a perspective of land, and it's their specialty. So I'm going to get to driving. That's the property, and that's the plan for today. Okay, what you see right here is typical of the Managed Forest Law program. Many cuts, not always, but many. This is what's called a shelter wood cut. And what they've done here, You can see this logging trail here. It's graveled, it's crowned. This is a nice asset, but what they've done is they've come into this timber. This was a hardwood section, a little more elevated, and they took out basically all the trees. They leave maybe, you know, 10 to 20 trees per acre as seed trees, but they space them out, and this is the result. Very spaced out. There's a lot of woody browse that's springing up in here, and that's really good for the deer and the animals. This is a really super high stem count. We talk about that a lot, and this is what I mean. The basal volume of timber or woody browse in here is significantly high. I can see behind me, I see aspen, I see some spruce coming up, I see some maple all regenerating, and I can see some browse activity on it. And so this is the food that's coming in for the animals. And what the MFL plan wants to do is typically they're going to manage it for that wildlife need. There's a lot of tamarack behind us that you can't see, and this regeneration is really going to pull in the deer. And so what they told me is they have taken about maybe 60 to 80 acres, we estimate, and they've clear cut it, and that's what they did here. And this is called a shelter wood cut. So if you're in the MFL plan and you're looking at reviewing a plan, and that you purchase a property or gonna purchase a property, you know they're gonna cut it in the future, and you start to see this, or you see the word shelter wood, that's what it looks like. Not bad for habitat, just not great for the eyes of most buyers. You know, oftentimes I don't see blinds that are in this good a shape. This is a really good quality blind on steel scaffolding. It's fairly new. It's got kind of a all-season siding wood, and this is a nice asset. One thing though to keep in mind when you're buying these properties, sometimes they can do a little bit of a bait and switch. This may not necessarily be part of your listing, even though they show it in the pictures. They may even talk to you about it when they show you property. When you make your offer, you got to be very specific that you got to include these, included by name, by description. Look up the company, the brand, and make sure that this is actually written in the deal, because a lot of times these are kind of like eye candy. This is kind of like the bait and switch. You think I got a completely set up property, but in reality they don't leave it behind. Or what they'll do is they'll use it as kind of a tool to get you to come up in price, get you to pay them a little bit more. So it's just really important, if you're working with an agent that's not a land specialist agent, that's not a hunting agent, this is not a fixture. This is considered personal property. They could simply pick this up and move it. You got to make sure you ask for it, be very descriptive, see if it's included in the price, and make sure you don't show up on the day that you purchase this and this baby's gone. Now I wanted to get down in here a little bit and just kind of see what this looks like, because this is a huge clear cut, and you can see a lot of young aspen growing up in here, and I could tell this has been done just in the last couple years, I would say. And you know, at first I look at this and I go, wow, what a wasteland. But you know, all's not lost here. There's a couple opportunities here. Number one, this isn't high value land. Without all the timber gone, all the value's been taken off it, all the pulp, all the timber value, but it has tremendous value to the person that kind of has a little bit of foresight, or can look down the road 10, 15 years, because what is, 6, 8, 10 feet tall now, aspen growth, early successional growth as we call it, is going to be great aspen habitat cover in the coming years. It's going to thicken up, it's going to be great bedding cover, and we've got acres of it here right in the middle of the property. And I see some bigger timber that we're getting to, so we'll take a look at that. But this is the bedding cover, this is the food and the bedding, and it's an opportunity because everyone recognizes this as the revenue has been taken out in the form of the timber, the pulp. You can buy it low. In 10, 15 years, this is going to look completely different. Just as a buyer, though, you just kind of have to look at this with the eye of, I'm going to be holding this for a little bit. We got to let it mature. The next buyer, you come in, you buy it low, you're going to bump it up and you're going to get a little equity if the area grows in equity. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later, and some of my thoughts of this area kind of at the end as we tie it all together. But if you see this and you think all the value is gone, not necessarily. You just got to look down the road a bit. Now, a term I want to kind of introduce here, because I haven't talked about before, is edge ratio. And what do I mean by that? Well, you can see right here, we're moving into a different biome. A biome is a change in habitat types, and whitetail especially relate to the edges of those biomes. The more edge you have, the better the edge ratio that you have. And when you look for a property that has diversity, as we've talked about, that's going to be a better property. And so I like to see these edges. I like to see a lot of it. Now, out here where we showed just a minute ago, you had massive amounts of cleared out land. There was no edge. It was a monoculture, all aspen. But an opportunity exists with not a lot of money where you could bring in some equipment and create maybe diversity pockets throughout this monoculture of new aspen, and in the process create a lot of edge. So I want to kind of think of a pizza, and you put pepperoni all over that pizza. Where you had cheese only, you added pepperoni, the diversity, and when you put the pepperoni on there, it made a little circle with a lot of edge. And if you made that all over the pizza, all over the landscape, you create that edge diversity, edge ratio, increase the edge ratio. So when you look at these properties and you're buying them at a good aggressive price, think of the improvements that you can do by creating habitat pockets and increasing your edge ratio, and that's exactly what we could do here. We're gonna get back in this bigger timber just to see what it looks like, but I can see some bigger trees, some different habitat types, and I'm curious to see what we get down the trail here a little bit. Okay, we're obviously in a little older area of the property as far as habitat goes. You can see how this is starting to open up here, and what this reminds me of is a great place to hunt woodcock and grouse, which when I met this seller, or excuse me, the buyer, and I asked her, you know, what do you want to do with the property? That's one of the things that she specifically said that I wanted to do. And there's a lot of clear-cut aspen, and I think there's going to be a lot of woodcock and grouse hunting. And so I'm actually in an area that looks really good for that. And it pleases me because it fits what she wants to do. So a key factor in searching for a property and searching for the agent that's going to help you is to identify what you want to do with the property. Right now, he's mainly an upland grouse hunter and woodcock, but with a hope that he can learn to hunt deer someplace. So I'm seeing habitat biomes, different types of habitat that lend itself to the way that she wants to use it. So I like to see this. It's great to see. This is definitely grouse country. You know, at one point before I came into Polk County, Wisconsin, I owned a place just like this, only it hadn't been logged. I had to pay guys, it took me about 10,000 bucks in total probably to build food plots like this and blast them out. This is probably about, I'm gonna say it's about a 16th acre in size. And it's a real nice attribute. They've got, they've been putting some clover in here. They've been trying to get a food plot going in here, and it probably just needs some lime and fertilizer, and you work it up, and you can get a nice food plot in here. If anything, situations like this, you don't have enough food for the deer, so you got to have a high volume food to get it going. But this is a nice attribute. This is a couple $1,000s worth of equity, and you add in that nice 360 blind that I showed you. It's a nice attribute to this property. And this is what it needs. If you want to enjoy it and you don't have the ability to do the work yourself, or you don't have the connections, maybe you're coming from a metro area, like in our area, again, the influencers, the Twin Cities Metro, this is already done for you. So this is nice. As I look around here, I'm seeing a couple trees around here that if you're a bow hunter, you can maybe get slightly off this plot. You got a little pinch point where the trail is planted with clover coming into this food plot, and I'm sure these deer are moving in and out of here. The only problem that I see here, the only challenge that I see is that these trails are planted in clover, and therefore it's bringing the deer to the trails, and that's not what you want. So I'd probably kill that, not have food on my travel corridors, but get the food in here. I could tell the terrain drops off on all sides. It's super thick. I can't see 20 feet in here. No doubt these deer are bedding nearby, and put a licking branch out here, a post with a branch coming off of it, create a water hole, a water source, and you can really make this a social hub. Every deer in the neighborhood is going to come right here. So I kind of like this. This looks pretty good. Now here's a really nice field, and I can see that they've got some clover planted in here, and they're trying to make this into a food plot. The challenge is that the soil in this area is not really good. It's more of a clay base, and it's something you want to pay attention to. What would do really good in here is just a simple mix of ryegrass and maybe oats or wheat. It'll be a really super high volume food plot. And I can tell you from experience, because I tried to food plot in very similar terrain in northern Wisconsin, just a couple counties to the north and east of me. Clover can get established if you have enough moisture. So if you could find an area that's a little lower, you can get your clover established, and it's just a high volume green food. But what does super well up here, and it's really simple to plant, it's just cereal grain rye. So if I'm a buyer, and what I'll recommend this to my buyer is, this could be a great food plot with cereal grain rye. You'll build up the soil, it plants real easy. It all starts with pH. Get your pH, amend the soil, get your fertilizer, and just plant this in cereal grain rye, and you're gonna have a great food plot. This is what you need. This is enough space here to supply the deer of this area that you're gonna pull in, because as soon as the trees turn brown and the moisture content comes out of the woody browse, they're gonna be on this green like you wouldn't believe. So I'd probably take one of those blinds that we saw, the smaller plots that we just were on, bring it over here and place it on this one. It's just gonna be a great attraction late season. And if there's not a lot of pressure, this place is gonna fill up with deer. We can see this clover growing in here. There's just a ton of biomass in here. Look at this. And to manage this, all you got to do is come in here and mow it. And I tell you what, I would get some rye and oats, probably some chicory back in here, because even if it gets baked out and hot during the summer, the chicory is going to grow. But that's a ton of biomass right there. I tell you, all good green food. The clover is going to die off in the winter. It'll be fantastic probably up until November, when it gets frosty and this becomes less palatable. The deer will still dig through it, but if you could get oats going in here, or cereal grain rye and chicory, some type of brassica mix, I tell you what, this would be fantastic. And it looks pretty good in here. You can tell how they have come in here, they've mowed it back, and that's exactly what you got to do with this. Not a lot of maintenance to this clover. Mow it a couple times and maybe spray for grasses and broadleaves. Well, I'm up in one of the box blinds that luckily was here because you could see a pretty good storm rolled in, a little burst, and I just scrambled and I got up in here, but we'll go ahead and wrap it up. So this looks like a pretty good property, guys. It's got a lot of things going on. It's a typical northern Wisconsin property that was logged off, and they made a nice infrastructure in the process. They made a nice road up the middle, and then they've come off in different spurs, have a food plot like this, and they've got a couple really nice stands that are positioned on those food plots, ready to capitalize on these openings. What it needs is a little bit of growth, a little bit of time to heal. So when you find these properties like this, you got to figure, you know, it's a 5, 10, 15-year hold, and it's going to look completely different. Because as I always say, you want to go into these purchases with the idea of how you're getting out of them and what's it going to look like to the next guy. Most people cannot or do not have the foresight to look past what they see right now. You just have to realize that these woods will heal, they're going to mature, that clear cut's going to thicken up. It's a tremendous food source for every animal in the area. They're very attracted to it. It's got a great trail system. There's some food plots in place. If the stands like this are included, even better. So when you're looking at these properties, just know your numbers. You got to get with a land specialist or get with an agent that knows the area. Find out what the averages are in these areas. There's ways to map them. Look for very similar sales. And I can tell you that this area where I'm at in Wisconsin is probably hovering around $1,000 an acre. This one is currently listed a little bit above, about $1,100 an acre, but it has some attributes that I really like. So I actually think he's got it listed at a pretty good price. The rain is letting up. I'm going to sit here a little bit longer. I can hear Lucy down below me crying because she's probably in the rain and wants Daddy to let's get out of here. But I hope you have enjoyed this property tour. And hey guys, if you're looking for property anywhere in the United States, you can get a hold of me. If I can't help you, I'll put you in touch with somebody who can. But if you're in western Wisconsin, I'd like to be your guy in the land business. As always, thanks for watching. I'm Neil Hogger. I'm a land specialist with Whitetail Properties Real Estate, and you've been watching The American Landman.